We are taught that acceptance of the end in mind stimulates the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, we could look at this further, or we could say go deeper into it. Based on this quote here from Neville, where he says, all its interest lies in your conviction of yourself. What do you say of the I am within you? We could say, what do you say I am to in mind expresses itself, and to help us reflect upon this in a way that is more multidimensional, working with the DILTS levels, as the identity, the values and beliefs, the capabilities, the behaviors and environments. Now, although the capabilities, behaviors, and environments, how we relate to them are interpretations from within, as in what we are saying I am to, although we might not be consciously aware of, we recognize that we move into different thinking patterns if we say I am to in relation to these areas here. Different states of mind, as Neville Goddard refers to it, if we do not relate that over to our vision. As I say, see what shows up as in harmony and in contribution to your vision. Now, this is the way of bringing forth inner peace, but also a way of remaining accepting of the end, thus maintaining that feeling of the wish fulfilled, which I sometimes refer to as flow. Now, what about this world then? What about this outer aspect of the inner world that we call reality? Environment, behaviors, capabilities. Well, we want to look at them as teachers. So I say, we think in image and speech, and what we identify with in relation to image and speech is what we are consciously and unconsciously saying I am to. And the subconscious mind does the expression of what we are consciously and unconsciously saying I am to. Or we could say reveals what we are saying I am to via the expressions in capabilities, behaviors, environments. And thus, the outer world can be looked at as a teacher. Now, this kind of way of thinking is what we've been encouraging. We call this internal locus of control. And so we want to bring ourselves into higher degrees of internal locus of control in relation to, doesn't have to be everything, but attributes on the journey to realizing our vision, the entrepreneurial success, the artistic expression, the innovation, and so forth. We can see it in how we relate to our behaviors, or what is expressed in our behaviors. What we're looking for is congruence. I would suggest that maintaining congruence allows you to maintain flow. And flow is beneficial because we learned from Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the book, that one of the definitions is where challenge meets skill. So we could look at challenge as perceived obstacles. When a person maintains their flow or feeling of the wish fulfilled, they're able to go over, under, through, or side, or transmute the obstacle into opportunity. So why is it then we find ourselves perhaps being reactive to the five sensory experience, knowing, at least consciously, that this is what's really going on? Perhaps it's our own inaccurate thinking that we have not made peace with. Very rigid on, or we could say absolutist perspectives that are in denial of the infinity and thus ambiguity. The internal world is infinite, and this expression of it here in the outer world is understood to the degree that we understand ourselves within. We make peace with it. We just say, look, I'm understanding how this works more so every day. And so he says, to be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. For you think from your ideas. All transformation begins with an intense, burning desire to be transformed. the first step in the renewing of the mind is desire. Now, desire stimulates a vision, what we desire to experience in reality. And what we're looking to do is commit to this vision in our mind, as he says, assume it as done. Know that from the moment that you commit, you decided that that's the way it's going to be, everything changes. Your behaviors change, your skills, if it's a skill you're cultivating, changes in ways that are known and unknown. Known could be come across some kind of book or a teacher who helps you develop the skill. Unknown ways, you improvise. You start to all of a sudden notice you have skills that you didn't consciously learn, but you seem to have them more so. Such has been the case for me when it comes to communication, public speaking. Seems like the more I accept the end of the vision of how I see myself, I don't seem to have read or studied certain information on communication, but I seem to automatically express it. And then interesting, someone will bring me a book and say, "Did you watch that video? Did you read that book? You seem to be doing those things that are in that video or in that book." And I say, I didn't even know that there was knowledge that exists that explains that behavior, that skill, that nuanced aspect of communication. We call this authentic expression, and we also recognize that a way to explain this is what we've been discussing, is that everything is within. The source is within, and we are expressing it. Now, we want to see this and understand this more every day and appreciate this, because what we consciously and unconsciously say "I am" to is revealed in our environments, our behaviors, our capabilities, how we relate to these different areas. And we have the power to change all of it based on what we associate "I am" to. Now, the person doesn't have to say "I am this, I am that." We can look at it as what a person identifies with in mind, what they assume themselves to be. So a way that he explains it really well is when he says, "You know a thing mentally by looking at it from the outside, by comparing it with other things, by analyzing it and defining it, by thinking of it. Whereas you can know a thing spiritually only by becoming it, only by thinking from it. You must be the thing itself and not merely talk about it or look at it." So when we say, "You are it in mind, I am this person now," the power of "I am" draws upon the change, initiates the change. Changes within yourself, changes with others, changes with everything. We want to see this as all sourced from within in relationship with what we say "I am" to. Now, that's thinking from it, because from the premise of that vision, you reveal in this infinite world, in all its perceived obstacles, ambiguity, perspectives, and interpretations, and all beyond, transcendent, all to that, we see precisely the becoming or the changes or the rearrangement, as I say sometimes, of reality to reflect that vision in environments, the world, behaviors, capabilities, and so forth. And so we want to encourage this, and we want to always ensure that we are going back to the source of it all. A person may fall into different states of mind where they may say, "I am something else," although unconsciously. They want to recognize through their reactivity and tension. Remember I said this? I suggest seeing failure not as a problem, rejection not as a problem, fear not as a problem, uncertainty not as a problem, but rather an opportunity. Reactivity, tension, not as a problem, but rather as an opportunity to understand. Go straight to the source and say, what are we identifying with in relation to this experience? And through that change of mind, And through that identification in mind, based on who you truly desire to be, which is the person at that vision of the success, you express from that premise. Now, he also says your imagination is the instrument where your redemption from slavery, sickness, and poverty is affected. If you refuse to assume the responsibility of the incarnation of a new and higher concept of yourself, then you reject the means, the only means whereby your redemption, that is, the attainment of your ideal, can be affected. So we can say what we imagine, what we think, what we assume to be, what we inner dialogue about, how we perceive ourselves to be, what is our perception, identification, our vision in relation to, many different ways of saying the same thing. And the source is, what are we saying I am to in regards to this imaginal activity? So you can imagine anything, absolutely anything. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you represent what you are imagining. Someone may suggest something to me. Joseph, I suggest that you think this way. Or I suggest that you imagine this, although they may not directly say it this way. But I have a preference in the matter, and thus you have a preference in the matter, to really question that and say, do I really want to identify with that? Is that really who I am? That's the power. The power is what we say I am to, and the power is behind, we say unknown ways, in relation to identifying in mind what we say I am to, thus calling upon the power to change the outer aspects of life to reflect what we say I am to. So the outer world is the becoming and reflecting, and in the mind we are, as we learned from Abdullah during that important message that he shared with Neville Goddard. I am in Barbados, and I got there first class. To recognize that in the infinite world, in imagination, in mind, all exists now. An outer world is akin to a reflection of, perhaps we could say, a garden, where you plant the seed in mind, and then it expresses itself in the growing, the journey, the realizing, till its fruition, till it produces the end result of the seed that was planted in mind. And so he says, the ideal you seek and hope to attain will not manifest itself, will not be realized by you until you have imagined that you already are that ideal. So that's the planting of the seed in mind. There is no escape for you except by a radical psychological transformation of yourself, except by your assumption of the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Therefore, make results or accomplishments the crucial test of your ability to use your imagination. So, crucial test, the results, behaviors, skills, environments, results. That's the true measure of the conscious use of the two gifts, speech and mind. As stated in the Hermetica, we were given two gifts, speech and mind. And we were also given preference in the matter of how we use these gifts. Although many still might be asleep, or we could say unconscious to what they say I am to, but they can bring conscious awareness as to what they say I am to by reflecting upon the behavior, skills, and environments. Track it back to the source within, identify with the true meaning, perspective, identity, and thus observe as things change. We're taught to not concern ourselves with the how. As he had stated, leave this world alone and go back to the source within and make the change within. All change happens within. The outer world is the teacher reflecting upon, as we talked about in Thursday's video, see the student and teacher as one. Now, we were relating that over to traditional learning, more specifically mind mapping, in which I said, an ideal perspective for accelerated learning is to see yourself as a student and a teacher, and to see the teacher who had assumed the role of the facilitator of the transformation or the behavioral change or the knowledge transfer as the teacher and the student, and they themselves Or we flip it around. If you're the teacher, see yourself as the student and the teacher. Then we have a mutual relationship. As William Blake once said very poetically, I am in you and you are in me, mutual in divine love. And so 3 key distinctions in relation to our conversation today that we want to keep into consideration. Number 1, everything depends on your attitude towards yourself. So we leave this world alone and we make the change within. What do we assume ourselves to be? What's our attitude towards ourselves? We look at the outer world environment, which includes people, circumstance, information, outer world aspects, our behaviors, our skills, as effects of the one cause within. And what are we saying I am too? Some ideal statements that are meta beliefs too. Other aspects of I am will be things like, I realize that I can have what I want because I'm complete within. I'm created in the image of the Creator and thus complete within. What I desire is mine. See, one of the things that we've realized on this journey, and I trust that you're realizing it more so as well, is we want to look within ourselves and ask ourselves, what do we really want? And then assume it is done, imagine it as done in imagination. Do this all day long. Rather than looking to this outer world or what other people are doing or what they're thinking and assuming and asking for permission or approval or validation or outer world-based assurance, we want to release from that. That's the kind of attitude we want to have in ourselves regarding the 2 gifts of speech and mind and eternity that's buried within us, of all the possible things that we can imagine. Number 2, all transformation is based upon suggestion, and this can work only where you lay yourself completely open to an influence. So what kind of influences are we laying ourselves open to? Knowing that we are the sole interpreter, and we can look at any suggestion and ask ourselves, is this really true? It's one of my favorite questions. Is this really true? And if you would like to further that, you could say, is this really true to the environment in my mind? Is it really true to the behaviors that I saw myself doing at the end? Is it really true of the ideal capabilities that I express in my imagination? Is this true of the true values and beliefs of the identity of the person that I saw myself at the end doing the imaginal scene thinking from, in that vision? And if not, we can release from that inaccurate thinking. Make a decision right then and there to say, I am too the accurate thinking that's found within. So we suggest it to ourselves. Perhaps we might say something like, I realize that when the wish or the desire or my vision is fulfilled in imagination, all that appears within my 5 sensory experience is actually in harmony and in contribution to my vision from the realness of who I am in my mind. This is an expression of, in relation to environment, behaviors, capability, it's a expression of mind. And I'm able to recognize this every day. Thus, I suggest to myself the ideal perspectives, the ideal relationships, the ideal ways of thinking. As I observe it express, and to borrow his words, on the screen of space, so we could say the mirror, or we could say reality, and thus knowing that the source of is the imaginal reality, the spiritual reality, the true reality. And in the spiritual reality, we also refer to this as the kingdom of heaven within. All is revealed based on selecting consciously what we say I am too. Number 3, you must imagine that you are already experiencing what you desire. That is, you must assume the feeling of the fulfillment of your desire until you are possessed by it. And this feeling crowds out all others out of your consciousness. So this is where we perhaps close our eyes, and you get better at it with practice. Just go right into your imagination. Step right into your imagination. Leave this world and all its 5 sensory interpretations out of the equation. Just step right out of it and go right into the imagination. see yourself in the end and assume you are that person right now. Many ways of doing this. As mentioned, I learned a lot of these things from Think and Grow Rich, the autosuggestion. And one of the audios that showed up within awareness was The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, and the way he articulated worked really well for me and continues to do so till this day, and I still have it with me, the Definite Chief Aim card, in which I have my goal over here. What was suggested was you write your goal on the card, and anytime you experience fear, doubt, indecision, or reactivity or overthinking in relation to dealing with the ambiguity and complexity of the five sensory experience, which is again sourced from within, but transcendent to that, simply release from that by picking up your card and reading it. And that brings you back into, let's go back here, what he says. You know a thing mentally by looking at it from the outside, by comparing it with other things, by analyzing it and defining it, by thinking of it, which perhaps at that time was a lot of overwhelm and complexity for whatever the reason may be. He says, well, you can know a thing, and this is the key, knowing a thing, spiritually, only by becoming it, by thinking from it. You must be the thing itself and not merely talk about it or look at it. So we're looking from it by picking up the goal card, reading it. And after reading it or imagining it, or whatever works for you, you've become it. You're back in that feeling of the wish fulfilled. You're at inner peace, harmony. And if you have persistent overthinking programming, I really recommend identifying the source of this programming via your beliefs and changing your beliefs. It will make things a lot easier. One of my favorite belief changes from Think and Grow Rich was, if you believe that money is a result of hard work alone, perish the thought. When I first read that, I thought, this guy's talking some nonsense here, because I was a hard worker for my whole life, worked in factories, and every dime I've ever earned, I believed that it was hard work, and so that's all I ever did. And now he's suggesting this, but the way he said it was a little bit suggestible, let's say. As Neville states, all transformation is based upon suggestion. So I allowed this suggestion. We have a preference in the matter in what we want to allow as far as suggestion. If I suggest something to you, anyone suggests anything to you, you have the power. Always remember this. This is the pinnacle of everything that I represent on this channel. You have the power to identify with that suggestion or not, whatever, whether it's sourced from your own thinking within, wherever it came from, you have the power to accept it or reject it. And if you accept it, you also have then the power to, if you would like to, identify with it. So I accepted it. I said, I could believe that money can be a result of ways that I don't know beyond hard work. And then things started to change. Opportunities started to show up. Money started to show up from unexpected places. People would show up wanting to do fun, flow-based business deals. My career started to advance. I started to make more money. And things just started to, and it continues to be more fun and flow-based as a result of further realizing that suggestion. Thus further representing that that source really was the suggestion, the vision of doing what I really love to do and earning well from it, and also getting money from unexpected sources. Maybe I don't know how it shows up or what were the causative factors, but that is something that I personally do not want to overthink about. That is the power of I am. And what we say I am to, we realize. And that ends up all changing the environments, the behaviors, capabilities. So I trust you found this video to be helpful and beneficial for your goals, your visions, your desires, whatever they may be. Let's conclude this with an autosuggestion to further emphasize these three distinctions. I can say, I realize that everything depends on the attitude towards myself, and thus I have the ability to identify with what I consciously desire to be, which is the person that is in my end experiencing the reality that I want to experience. Through the process, I understand that I can suggest to myself any interpretation of the environment's behaviors, capabilities, and I decide to identify with the interpretations that I feel resonant with, and that are thus in harmony with my vision. Upon reflection, I realize then I have done the imaginal scene to experience that which I truly desire. I have accepted the end, and I realize that acceptance of the end wills the means, and thus I feel the fulfillment and the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and automatically so within myself have made peace with conflicting, perceived contradictory ideas regarding divergent and convergent viewpoints in my consciousness, and thus now experience a flow-based, loving, joyous journey to the realization of my vision. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.